So my friends, this week's Torah portion speaks about the tensions that can exist between siblings. But it's also true that tensions can exist sometimes between parents and their children. So as many of you may know, we have a Darshan program here at Adat Ariel where we are very fortunate that we have lay Darshanim, lay people come up and speak. And 4 months ago, give or take, maybe a little bit less, Marty Shapero came up to speak. And upon hearing his father speak, his son Stephen Shapero came up to me right at the end of service and said, "I want to go next." Okay, it didn't quite happen that way, not at all. But I have been looking through the records, and I have not been able to find at any point in time where we've had both a father or a parent and a child speak the same year, let alone so soon after one another, as our Darshan. And so it is a pleasure to be able to share and call up to the beam at this point in time Stephen Shapero. Stephen has been a member here of Adat Ariel, gosh, how many years? Too many years even to count. He currently serves as the VP of membership and is just a very gracious, lovely person, and it really is a pleasure to be able to share the bima with him this morning. Thank you.
I'm your technician here.
Okay.
There, now you're old.
First of all, congratulations to David and the entire Prell family. You did a great job. Everybody should be very proud of you. This week's portion is Toldot. It begins by saying, this is the story of Isaac, which it is. But as the rabbi mentioned, it is also the story of Jacob and Esau. Isaac is sort of a passive character. Things happen to him more than him influencing events. Although actually he's very successful. He avoids conflicts, and he's extremely prosperous. But the main events center around Jacob and Esau. Jacob, of course, is a patriarch, one of the founders of the Jewish people. Esau is his twin older brother, who is considered an enemy of the Jewish people, or at least a precursor of enemies. I decided to look at the story from the perspective of Esau. Esau never had a chance. Even before he and Jacob were born, their mother Rebekah was told by God that the younger would dominate the older. Jacob was pulling on his heel even as they were born. Esau was born red, Edom, and hairy, both considered to be less than desirable. So from even before the time he was born, Esau was considered lesser. These opinions were not the result of any character faults on Esau's part. They existed from the time of his and Jacob's birth. The Torah does not speak of incidents during the time of the twins' childhood, but we can imagine. Rebekah would clearly have preferred Jacob. Esau is criticized once he grew up for hunting and going on journeys, while Jacob was an intellectual staying at home. But considering the atmosphere, Esau's response was understandable. He wanted to get out of there, where he wasn't particularly appreciated. Then he's criticized for it. The portion relates the incident of the sale of the birthright. Esau comes back from a long journey and is famished and parched. He's so hungry and thirsty that he thinks he's going to die. Jacob is willing to give him food and drink, but only if Esau sells his birthright in exchange. A first reaction to this is, what? You've got to be kidding. As a lawyer, I have spent a great part of my professional life working on business torts and determining the enforceability of contracts. The defense of duress occurred to me when I read this story. Duress, like most legal doctrines, is easy to define at the edges and difficult to decide in the middle. For example, if someone pulls a gun on someone and says, if you don't sign your house over to me, I'll shoot you, that property transfer would not be upheld in court. On the other hand, people sign contracts all the time feeling, I didn't have any choice in the matter. I didn't have any alternative. I had to do it. And those contracts are perfectly valid. Some commentators have diametrically opposite reactions to the story of the birthright sale. Some have stated that Esau's response showed how little he cared for the birthright. Others, however, have emphasized that Esau was so hungry and tired that he was near death and had no choice whatsoever in the matter. Technically, what occurred here was a distress exploitation contract. Unlike the situation where someone pulls a gun on someone else and demands the house, Jacob did not cause the duress. Esau was in distress that was not caused by anything Jacob did, but Jacob certainly exploited the situation. There are cases and law in the United States that make this distinction and uphold distress exploitation contracts. And unless the contract is invalid for some other reason, they are enforced. I can provide citations. Interestingly, traditional Jewish law has doctrine that is contrary. I will quote from an article by a scholar at NYU Law School that I read. It says, Jewish law offers an additional view that bases the distress exploitation doctrine on a moral examination of the exploiter's behavior. The exploiter is morally obligated to aid the distressed and is morally prohibited from gaining from that distress. Demanding above-market terms from the distressed person violates the moral prohibition and is legally significant. It enables the distressed party to annul his contractual commitment. According to this view, the distress exploitation doctrine may be seen as a means to compel the oppressor exploiter to fulfill his moral duty to the oppressed exploited. And modern Israeli law is consistent with the traditional Jewish viewpoint. A statute in the Israeli codes governing contracts says, rescission by reason of extortion is allowed if a party or his agent takes advantage of the distress, inexperience, or mental or physical weakness of the other party, and the terms of the contract are unreasonably less favorable than is customary. The deal demanded by Jacob is in fact a rescue contract where the exploiter is saving the life of the other party. This is recognized as a particularly extreme version of a distress exploitation contract. So here, under both traditional Jewish law and modern Jewish law, of moral obligations, Jacob's actions were offensive and the deal was unenforceable. What is more interesting, though, is what did not happen. After this pretty outrageous demand and deal, Esau did not complain that he was extorted. Certainly he couldn't complain to Rebekah, who was always on Jacob's side. But Esau didn't complain to Isaac either. Why not? Perhaps because he knew that Isaac wouldn't cross Rebekah, or that Isaac was not going to interfere for whatever reason. The portion also notes that Esau married 2 Hittite women, and that Rebekah and Isaac were upset about that. But something is missing here too. There's not a word about Isaac and Rebekah arranging a marriage for Esau with their ancestral relatives back home like they did for Jacob. Even though, to be fair, the portion does say that Rebekah couldn't stand the Hittite women so much that that's what caused her to think about arranging a marriage for Jacob. Then, of course, there's the conspiracy between Rebekah and Jacob to defraud Esau out of the blessing as the firstborn. Esau asks for the blessing, and Isaac asks for his favorite food. Jacob brings the food and pretends to be Esau, lying to his father when Isaac asks who it is. This whole story strikes me as preposterous, leading us to believe that Isaac knew all along that Jacob was stealing Esau's blessing. Isaac knew that the voice was Jacob's. Isaac knew that there had not been enough time that had passed for Esau to go, hunt, capture the game, come back, dress the game, cook the meat, and present it to Isaac. Isaac likely further knew that the animal skill that Jacob placed on himself to show that he was hairy was a fake. No matter how hairy Esau was, it is hard to believe that he felt like a goat. The Torah says that Isaac was blind, and some commentators have wondered whether Isaac was purposefully blind. I think so. Otherwise, Isaac was not mentally competent, and he surely was, as demonstrated by his pretty sophisticated attempts to mollify Esau when he returned and discovered that Isaac had already blessed Jacob. So we are left with the question of the lessons and messages of this parsha. One answer could be, it's better to be mom's favorite. But there could also be a more cosmic explanation. Jacob was the guy. Esau wasn't the guy, and Esau was never going to be the guy. The Jewish people needed Jacob. The world needed Jacob. God God needed Jacob. And so Jacob it was. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.